Okay, so music lovers, let's talk about instrument strings.
Hi.
These things are really the unsung heroes of every, you know, guitar riff, every violin solo, any banjo pluck that you can think of.
Yeah.
We are diving deep today into the world of instrument strings with this beginner's guide from strings.ie.
Okay.
So first things first, how do you even know what type of strings you need for your particular instrument?
Well, that's where things get tricky because a lot of people just assume all strings are created equal,
Oh no.
and that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I think a lot of confusion starts with guitars, right?
Absolutely. The most common mistake that people make is getting acoustic and classical guitar strings confused.
Yeah, those are two very different beasts.
Very different. Acoustic guitars, they're built for that higher tension of the steel strings.
Hmm.
And then classical guitars have a much more delicate construction, and it's specifically designed for the warmer, mellower sounds of those nylon strings.
Hmm.
Putting steel strings on a classical guitar is like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
It's just not going to end well.
And you don't want to be the one footing the bill for that repair.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of steel strings, acoustic guitar strings also come with different metal windings like bronze or phosphor bronze, which can have a big impact on the tone.
See, now, to my ear, I'll be honest, I'm not always sure I can tell the difference between different string materials. So what should I even be listening for?
It's subtle, but it is noticeable once you kind of know what to listen for.
Okay.
Bronze strings are known for a bright, clear tone, almost bell-like.
Okay.
They're really great all-rounder choice, especially for beginners.
Hmm.
Now, phosphor bronze, on the other hand, that has a warmer, mellower sound with kind of a richer low end to it,
Okay.
they tend to be a little bit more expensive.
Right.
But a lot of musicians swear by their longevity
Yeah.
and their ability to bring out the nuances of an acoustic guitar's voice.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So if I want that classic, bright acoustic sound, bronze is a good starting point. But if I want something with a little bit more warmth and depth, maybe phosphor bronze is the way to go.
Yeah,
Now, what about electric guitars? Do those have their own set of string quirks?
they do.
Okay.
Electric guitar strings are generally made with steel,
Hmm.
but they typically feature nickel windings.
Okay.
Now, this is where it gets interesting.
Okay, so electric guitar strings, nickel windings. Tell me more.
Yeah, so nickel windings on electric guitar strings, what they do is they give it a really warm, smooth tone, perfect for those bluesy bends and buttery solos.
Okay,
It's a classic sound for a reason.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Can we talk about string gauges? Because this is where I feel like I need a decoder ring.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, feel that way.
Yes.
Imagine this, you're at the music store
Okay.
and you see strings that are labeled as light medium and then just a jumble of numbers.
Oh yeah, like 1046 or
Exactly, 1253. What does it all mean?
Yeah, it's enough to make you want to put the guitar down and pick up the ukulele.
Right. Well, hold on to that guitar because those numbers, those magical numbers, refer to the string gauge,
Okay.
basically the thickness of the string.
Okay.
And here's why it's relevant to you. Lighter gauge strings, they're thinner, which means they're easier to press down on the fretboard.
Okay.
They're kind of like the gateway drug to guitar playing,
Right.
especially if you're a beginner. You're still developing those calluses and that hand strength.
Yeah, you don't want to start with the heavy gauge strings,
No, not at all. Those fingertips will thank you.
for sure.
Think of it like this, lighter strings. They're like running shoes. They're flexible, forgiving, and great for getting started. But as you get stronger and more experienced, you might crave a little bit more resistance, a little bit more power.
Okay.
That's where those heavier gauge strings, they come in.
Okay.
Those are like your sturdy hiking boots.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, they're built for tackling tougher terrain. You get more volume and a richer tone.
So those cryptic numbers, like the 1046 or the 1253, that's telling you the thickness range of the strings in the set.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay.
So the first number usually refers to the thinnest string, which is the high E string.
Okay.
And then the second number represents the thickest string, which is that low E string.
Okay.
So for example, a set that's labeled 1046, that means the high E string has a diameter of 0.010 inches, and the low E string is 0.046 inches.
Gotcha. So it's like a range from thinnest to thickest.
Exactly.
Okay, no, I've heard guitarists casually throw around terms like I use 10s or I'm switching to 12s. What are they talking about?
Yeah, so that's just musician shorthand.
Okay.
They're usually referring to the gauge of their high E string.
Okay.
So if they say, I use 10s, that just means they use a set of strings that has a 10 gauge high E string.
Gotcha.
That's all.
It's like a little secret code.
Yeah.
What about the terms light and medium? Is there a standard gauge range for that or?
It's where it gets a little bit tricky again,
Okay.
because those terms can be a little misleading.
Okay.
What one brand calls medium, Another might label as heavy.
Oh, great. So
Yeah.
not confusing at all.
Right, so it's always best to look at the actual numbers just to be sure. But generally speaking, light gauge strings usually fall on that 1046 range, while medium gauge strings, they're typically around that 1356.
Okay.
But don't let that term medium fool you. Those strings can be tough on the fingers, especially if you're used to lighter gauges.
So maybe err on the side of caution, start with the light gauge strings, and you can always go heavier later.
Always better to start light and then kind of work your way up.
Now, what happens if you break a string mid-song? Can you just replace the single string, or do you need a whole new set?
I've been there. It's not fun.
It's not fun trying to replace a string like 5 minutes before a gig.
Definitely not the most glamorous part of being a musician.
Yeah.
And while it might be tempting to just replace that one broken string,
Yeah.
there are a couple things to keep in mind. One, if your strings are old and worn, that new string is going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Really?
It'll be so much brighter and louder than the rest of the set, it's going to create a really uneven sound.
Oh, so it's like having one super bright light bulb in a room full of dimmer ones.
Exactly. It's just not going to sound quite right.
Okay.
And then secondly, changing your strings regularly is essential for maintaining the best sound and playability of your instrument.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Think of it like giving your guitar a spa day, a fresh set of strings. It can really breathe new life into the sound.
I like that, a sonic spa day.
Exactly.
So in most cases, a new set is the way to go.
Yeah.
Now, we've been talking a lot about guitars. What about other string instruments? What kind of string secrets do violins and folk instruments hold?
Well, violins are fascinating because violins actually come in a range of sizes, with 4/4 being the standard size for adults.
Okay.
Younger players often start on smaller sizes like a 1/4 or a half, depending on their age and arm length.
Oh, that makes sense.
It's like finding the right shoe.
Yeah.
You want an instrument that fits comfortably and allows for the proper technique.
So don't be afraid to experiment with different sizes till you find the perfect one.
Totally.
Now, what about those folk instruments like banjos and mandolins? They often have those cool loop end strings, right?
Yeah, they do.
Instead of the ball at the end.
Exactly. So instead of having a ball on the end, like most guitar strings, they've got that little loop, almost like a shoelace.
Okay.
And that loop attaches to hooks or pins on the instrument's tailpiece, which makes them super easy to install and remove.
So no need for like special tools or anything? You just loop them on and you're good to go.
Pretty much, some instruments might have like a specific way of attaching them, but generally they're designed for straightforward string changes.
Okay.
And speaking of making life easier, we can't forget about those essential tools, like string winders.
Yes. String winders are a game changer.
Yeah, they're indispensable, especially if you change your strings frequently.
Yeah.
Can you imagine trying to wind those tuning pegs by hand? Hundreds of turns.
Hundreds.
A string winder does all the hard work for you quickly and efficiently.
And it saves you from those hand cramps.
Exactly.
Now, the guide mentions 2 types of string winders, the basic winder and the pro winder. What's the difference? Is it even worth it to splurge for the pro version?
Honestly, they'll both get the job done.
Okay.
The Pro winder might have a few extra features, maybe like a built-in string cutter
Okay.
or like a more ergonomic design.
Right.
But honestly, even that basic winder will significantly speed up your string changes and save you from hand fatigue.
Yeah. I'm all about making the process smoother and faster.
For sure.
What about tuners? I remember starting out with one of those old school pitch pipes, and let's just say it was a little hit or miss.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
Yeah,
Technology has come a long way.
for sure.
Digital tuners now are so accurate and easy to use.
Yeah, they're great.
They listen to the frequency of your strings and tell you whether you're sharp, flat, or perfectly in tune.
It's a must-have for any musician, for sure.
Absolutely.
Now, before we wrap up, you mentioned you had a provocative thought for our listeners to ponder.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about the technical aspects of strings, like the materials, the gauges, the tools.
Right.
But I think it's fascinating to consider how these seemingly small choices
Yeah.
can drastically impact the sound and feel of different musical genres.
Okay.
Imagine a heavy metal guitarist trying to shred on a set of nylon classical guitar strings.
Or a bluegrass musician using super thick bass strings on their banjo.
Exactly. It just wouldn't sound right.
No, it wouldn't. It seems so obvious now that you mention it.
Yeah.
The strings really are like the voice of the instrument.
They are.
And they play a huge role in shaping the sonic identity of a genre.
For sure.
So the next time you're listening to your favorite music, take a moment to appreciate the strings,
Yeah.
that often overlooked but essential role that they play in creating the sonic landscape. Well, there you have it, folks.
Yeah.
We've journeyed into the heart of instrument strings, demystified those gauges, and discovered the subtle ways that they shape the music we love.
Yeah.
Huge thanks to strings.ie for providing such a comprehensive guide.
It's a great guide.
Be sure to check them out if you're ever in need of strings accessories or just some expert advice. And until next time, keep those instruments tuned, keep those strings fresh, and keep on exploring the incredible world of music.